time, I was playing extremely well. In other words, I got on a hot putting streak. All of a sudden, I fell into it, and I started making putts, and I went in to the playoff in 1971 with Nicklaus, and I beat him in the playoff. Gave me a tremendous amount of confidence. I went to the Canadian.
A legend was born on a humid Monday morning in 1971, but he wasn't supposed to be there. Lee Trevino, the chattering hustler from Texas public courses, stood on the first tee at Merion Golf Club, about to face Jack Nicklaus in an 18-hole playoff for the U.S. Open. The silence was crushing. This cathedral of old establishment golf, where Bobby Jones and Ben Hogan had written history, seemed built for men like Nicklaus, not for working-class jokers like Trevino. Nobody expected the Merry Mex to survive. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a rubber snake. Before we dive into what happened next, if you love underdog stories where confidence crushes perfection, make sure you're subscribed. This is the greatest golf story ever told. Lee Trevino never belonged in places like Merion. Born into poverty in Garland, Texas, grew up in a 3-room shack with no plumbing, no electricity, and no father. His grandfather was a gravedigger. Trevino dropped out of school in 8th grade to work, scavenging golf balls that flew over the fence of the local country club. He learned the game not in junior academies, but on public courses where matches were played for cash, and losing meant going hungry. He famously said, "You don't know what pressure is until you've played for $5 a hole with only $2 in your pocket." During his hustling years at Tennyson Park and Horizon Hills, Trevino became a legend for his ability to win under absurd conditions. When opponents stopped betting against him with regular clubs, he handicapped himself with a taped-up 32-ounce Dr. Pepper bottle. He would throw the ball up, hit it like a baseball bat, put croquet style with the bottle's neck. He played with that bottle for 3 years and never lost a match. This was a man who viewed golf not as a solemn ritual, as survival and entertainment combined. These hustling matches were Trevino's true education. While Nicklaus was learning course management at exclusive clubs under professional instruction, Trevino was learning something far more valuable: how to win when losing meant genuine hardship. He developed an ability to perform under pressure that no country club could teach. Every shot on those Texas public courses carried real weight. Miss a putt, lose your gas money, hit into the water, explain to your wife why there's no grocery money. This crucible forged a mental toughness that would prove invaluable at Merion. Trevino wasn't just playing for a trophy, he was playing the only way he knew how, like his life depended on it. By contrast, Jack Nicklaus was golf royalty. The Golden Bear had already won 2 U.S. Opens by 1971 and was dominating the sport with machine-like precision. He hit towering shots that stopped softly on the hardest greens. Psychologically, he was a fortress, playing in complete silence, analyzing every variable with computer efficiency. He existed in a bubble of concentration, so intense it was often called a cocoon. For Nicklaus, golf was serious business requiring total emotional control. The contrast between these two men represented more than just different playing styles. It was a collision of two Americas, the country club versus the public park, silence versus noise. Trevino's swing itself was a rebellion against convention. He played with an open stance, a strong grip, and a low, burning fade that he described with his trademark humor. "You could talk to a fade," he would say, "but a hook won't listen." It was a swing built to fight the brutal Texas wind, forged through thousands of rounds where every shot had financial consequences, from his flat-footed stance to his rapid-fire playing pace. Golf instructors looked at his technique and shook their heads, yet somehow it worked at the highest level. And while Nicklaus represented textbook perfection, his swing was taught in golf academies worldwide. His mental discipline was studied by sports psychologists. He was the model every young golfer was told to emulate. The upcoming playoff represented more than a championship. It was a referendum on whether golf's old rules still applied. The 1971 U.S. Open at Merion had been a grueling 72-hole battle that ended in a tie. An amateur, Jim Simons, had led for much of the final round, adding unpredictability to the proceedings. Trevino played steady golf, shooting 69 in the final round, though he stumbled on the 18th hole when his concentration was broken by a spectator falling from a tree. He finished at 280, even par. Nicklaus, playing in the final group with Simons, had a 14-foot birdie putt on 18 to win outright. In a rare moment of fallibility, he pulled the putt. The playoff was set. What made this matchup particularly interesting was the psychological dynamic between the two players. Earlier that year, Nicklaus had publicly mused that he hoped Trevino never finds out how good he is. Later that spring, after Trevino had skipped the Masters, a tournament he disliked because the course setup favored high-ball hitters like Nicklaus, Jack pulled him aside. He told Trevino directly, "You just don't know how good you are. You can win anywhere." This validation from the best player in the world filled Trevino with new confidence. He realized his unorthodox game wasn't a liability, but a weapon that even the Golden Bear respected. Monday morning arrived with thick humidity and tension. The playoff gallery was smaller than the weekend crowds, comprised of the most dedicated enthusiasts. This amplified the church-like silence that Merion was famous for. Nicklaus arrived in his signature mode, silent and focused, eyes either downcast or staring into the distance. He sat on a bench near the tee markers, already visualizing his opening shot, building his cocoon of concentration. The atmosphere was suffocating. Merion's clubhouse loomed over the first tee like a judge's bench. The gallery stood in reverent silence, as if attending a coronation rather than a golf match. This was Nicklaus territory, an environment where his ability to block out distractions gave him an insurmountable advantage. The smart money was on the Golden Bear. Sports writers had already drafted their stories about Nicklaus's inevitable triumph. Playoff felt like a formality, a necessary 18 holes before the trophy presentation. Nobody expected fireworks. Nobody expected a hustler from Texas to disrupt the natural order. Trevino arrived with different energy. He was terrified, actually. He knew that if he tried to match Nicklaus's intensity, if he tried to outfocus or outstare the bear, he would lose. He needed to disrupt the frequency of the match. He needed noise and chaos to survive. As Trevino rummaged through his enormous golf bag looking for a glove, his hand brushed against something unexpected. It was a rubber snake about 3 feet long that his daughter had bought during a visit to the Fort Worth Zoo 2 months earlier. Trevino had tossed it in his bag and forgotten about it. Earlier in the week, a wire service photographer had asked him to pose with it, how high the Merion rough was that it could hide a snake. After the photo, the toy went back into the bag. Now, standing on the first tee with the weight of a U.S. Open playoff bearing down, Trevino's instincts took over. He pulled out the snake. Popular myth claims Trevino threw the snake at Nicklaus aggressively, trying to startle him. But the truth was more collaborative. Nicklaus saw him take it out and asked him to throw it over. Trevino obliged, tossing the rubber reptile across the teeing ground. It landed near the Golden Bear. The reaction was immediate and explosive. A woman in the gallery, caught off guard by a 3-foot snake flying through the air, screamed. The crowd gasped. Then something extraordinary happened. Nicklaus looked at the snake, picked it up, and laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh. He inspected the toy, grinning at the absurdity, and tossed it back to Trevino. In that singular moment, the entire playoff shifted. Trevino had shattered the suffocating atmosphere that Nicklaus thrived in. He had dragged the Golden Bear out of his cocoon and into the playground. By making Nicklaus laugh, Trevino humanized the monument. He wasn't playing a statue anymore. He was playing a guy who laughed at rubber snakes. Trevino later admitted his motivation was as much about calming his own nerves as disrupting Nicklaus. "I need all the help I can get," joked to the crowd. Snake was psychological warfare disguised as a prank. A hustler's trick elevated to championship golf. With the laughter fading, the match began. The scorecard would quickly reveal the opening was anything but predictable. On the first hole, Trevino played poorly, still buzzing from the adrenaline of the moment. He made bogey. Nicklaus, seemingly channeling his amusement into focus, birdied the opening hole. The gap was immediately 2 strokes. The narrative seemed to be correcting itself. Clown had his fun, but now the champion was at work. When Jack Nicklaus took a lead in a major, he rarely gave it back, but the turning point came immediately. On the par 5 second hole, Nicklaus found a greenside bunker. For a player of his caliber, this should have been routine. However, the sand at Merion was heavy and the greens were slick. Nicklaus left his first bunker shot in the sand. He failed to save par, making bogey. On the 3rd hole, the nightmare repeated. Nicklaus again found a bunker. Again, he left his first shot in the sand. Error compounded into a double bogey. In just 30 minutes, Nicklaus had gone from 1 stroke ahead to 2 strokes behind. Invincibility was cracked. These bunker disasters were uncharacteristic, suggesting that perhaps the rhythm of the match, disrupted by the snake and Trevino's ceaseless chatter, was affecting the Bears' usually ironclad focus. As the match progressed through the front 9, a new element entered the battle. A violent thunderstorm rolled over the course, halting play on the 6th hole for approximately 1 hour. This weather delay would prove critical. Golf conditions often favor specific ball flights. Nicklaus was a high ball hitter who launched towering shots that relied on height to stop on firm greens. Trevino hit low, line drive fades that relied on run. Normally, wet conditions hurt a low ball hitter because the ball won't roll, but Merion's greens were small and firm. During the delay, Trevino realized the rain was a gift. Had it not rained, I would not have won that playoff, he later admitted. His internal monologue during the delay was frantic and hopeful. "Keep it up, baby, keep it up. Now my low ball's going to stop." The rain softened the greens just enough that Trevino could fire his low irons directly at flagsticks. They would check and stop. It neutralized Nicklaus's height advantage. When play resumed, Trevino felt the course had tilted in his favor. Holding a lead against Jack Nicklaus on the back 9 of a major is one of sports' most difficult tasks. Nicklaus was famous for charges where he would birdie multiple holes in succession, crush opponents' spirits. On the par 4 11th hole, Nicklaus made his move, birdieing to cut Trevino's lead to 1 stroke. The crowd sensed the shift. The bear was waking up. The response from Trevino on the 12th hole is the competitive climax of this story. Facing a treacherous downhill birdie putt of about 25 feet, Trevino stood over the ball with his Wilson putter. In a moment of supreme clutch performance, he rolled the putt into the center of the cup. "That's the best I got, baby," he reportedly said. The birdie restored his two-stroke cushion immediately after Nicklaus applied pressure. It was a psychological backbreaker that, a clear message, "I am not Jim Simons. I am not going to fold." Trevino continued applying pressure, birdieing the 15th hole to extend his lead to 3 strokes, with only 3 holes remaining. Throughout this entire stretch, Trevino never stopped talking. He chatted with his caddy, with police officers guarding the ropes, and even with Nicklaus himself. "You can talk to a fade, but a hook won't listen," he quipped, delivering one of golf's most famous lines. This constant verbal energy was Trevino's pressure release valve. If he stopped talking, he might start thinking about the magnitude of the moment. So he kept the air filled with noise, preventing Merion's silence from crushing him. The walk up the 18th fairway was a victory lap. Nicklaus, defeated, could only watch as Trevino navigated the final hole, the ease of a Sunday morning round. Trevino tapped in for par to shoot 2 under par, a 68. Nicklaus finished with 71. Margin was 3 strokes, but the dominance felt greater. When the final putt dropped, Trevino didn't weep or fall to his knees. He laughed. He threw his cap. He shook Nicklaus's hand with genuine vigor. Nicklaus, ever the sportsman, was gracious. He acknowledged that Trevino's 68 under those conditions was darn good golf. "He had a knack for playing some of his best golf against me," Nicklaus admitted. Trevino, true to form, deflected the praise with humor. "You gotta be lucky to beat Jack Nicklaus because he's the greatest golfer to ever hold a club," he told the press. "I am a lucky dog." But everyone knew it wasn't luck. The man who had played with a Dr. Pepper bottle had just beaten the man who played with the precision of a machine. The victory at Merion sparked one of the greatest sustained runs of excellence in sports history. In the 20 days following the U.S. Open, Lee Trevino played golf at a supernatural level. July 4th, he won the Canadian Open, defeating Art Wall Jr. in a playoff. 6 days later, he traveled to Royal Birkdale in England and won the British Open, defeating Lu Lianghuan by 1 stroke. By winning the U.S., Canadian, and British Opens in less than a month, Trevino became the first and still the only player to win those 3 prestigious national titles in a single year. It was a feat of endurance and form that eclipsed even legendary seasons by Hogan and Nelson. The sports media lionized him. Sports Illustrated featured him on their cover, cementing his status as a cultural icon. The legacy of this story extends far beyond a rubber snake and a single playoff. Trevino fundamentally redefined what a golf champion could be. Before him, the model was stoic silence. Hogan, Nelson, Nicklaus, these men treated golf as grim duty. Trevino proved you could be loose, talkative, and funny, yet still possess a killer instinct. He showed that laughter wasn't weakness, but a mechanism for releasing tension. "There is no such thing as a natural touch," Trevino once said. "Touch is something you create by hitting millions of golf balls." But he also understood that touch disappears when hands are tight with fear. Snake, the jokes, the constant chatter, they were all tools to keep hands soft and minds free. Trevino's win was a victory for every public course golfer in America. He was a hero to the municipal players, guys who played in t-shirts and jeans, who bet their lunch money on the 9th green. He validated their existence in a sport that often excluded them. He proved you didn't need a country club pedigree to beat the king. You just needed a good swing and the guts to use it. His most famous quote captures his blend of humor and philosophy perfectly. "You are caught on a golf course during a storm and are afraid of lightning? Hold up a 1-iron. Not even God can hit a 1-iron. It's a joke, but it's also a statement of humility, acknowledging the difficulty of the game while laughing in the face of danger." Lee Trevino is often remembered as a showman, a label that sometimes obscures his genius. He was a shot maker of the highest order, a tactician who understood wind and turf better than almost anyone. But his greatest gift to golf was his humanity. At Humid Monday in 1971, Lee Trevino stood in the Lion's Den, faced the greatest player of all time on a course designed to crush hope. His response was to throw a rubber snake. In doing so, he taught a lesson that transcends golf. When pressure is at its highest, when silence is deafening, and when odds are stacked against you, laugh might just be the thing that saves you. Trevino didn't just beat Jack Nicklaus that day, he outmaneuvered him. He turned the U.S. Open into a street fight, and in a street fight, the hustler always wins. Pressure playing for $5 a hole with only 2 in your pocket, that's real pressure. Compared to that, winning the U.S. Open was just a walk in the park. If this story inspired you, if you believe joy can beat fear and personality can triumph over perfection, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from following the rules, but from knowing when to pull out the rubber snake.